This short video will talk to you about word choice questions for higher reading for understanding, analysis and evaluation. So analysis questions are either going to specify one or more specific techniques. So how does the writer's use of word choice and imagery show, blah, blah, blah. Alternatively, they might just allow you to comment on any techniques that they've used, in which case they'll ask how the writer's use of language shows something. It's important for you to remember, particularly those of you that have come from GCSE, that in SQA parlance, language covers all features that a writer might use. So that includes sentence structure, repetition, parallel structure. Things that you might think of as structure techniques also fall underneath the umbrella of language. So a little recap about what we're looking for in word choice questions then. Remember, the denotation of a word is its basic meaning, i.e. what you would find if you looked it up in a dictionary. The connotation of a word is the associated ideas and images, all the little connections, all the little things that that word makes you think of. And when we're analysing word choice, denotation is not enough. We're interested in the connotations of the word, all those associations. Okay, so I'm going to go over some worked examples of words just to talk about the connotations, just so that you're clear what it is we're talking about. All the words I'm going to use here have the same basic denotation. They're all words you would use to describe a dog, but they have different connotations or associations. And what those extra connotations do is they convey either additional levels of meaning or they convey the writer's attitude towards something. And the three words we're going to look at are mutt and pooch and hound. Okay, so mutt, pooch, hound. All three of those words mean essentially the same thing. They mean a dog, but they all have very different connotations. So before we move on and I tell you about the connotations of those words, you might want to pause the video and just have a little think about those three words, mutt, pooch and hound, and think for yourself, what are the connotations of those words? If you were imagining a dog which had been described using those words, what type of dog would you be imagining? So we're going to start with the word mutt. We're going to think, okay, if you called a dog a mutt, what is it that you're trying to say about that dog by using that particular word? So you might think the dog might be scruffy. It's certainly a word you would use to describe a dog that was a mongrel or wasn't a pedigree, wasn't a particular crossbreed, but rather was just a dog of indeterminate breed. And it also perhaps suggests something a little bit more affectionate. It suggests that maybe it's a dog with character. Now, pooch, on the other hand, very different connotations. That might suggest a dog that has been pampered or spoiled by its owner. It's probably a small and delicate dog, the kind of little dog like in that picture you might carry around in your handbag. So certainly a very different type of dog from what we might expect from a mutt. And then lastly, the word hound. Well, again, that suggests a dog that might be used for hunting. Again, it certainly suggests a pedigree dog, something a little bit more noble and refined. Okay, so three different words that all essentially mean the same thing. They all mean dog, but they all have very different connotations. And if you as a writer were to use one of those words, you would be using it because you wanted to convey all those extra layers of meaning, all those extra aspects of your attitude towards the dog to your reader. So here is a sample question looking at word choice. This is using an extract from an article by the writer Ben Goldacre, and it was written relating to the swine flu pandemic of 2009. The article was called Parmageddon. It was in The Guardian, and you should be able to find it online. You can also find it in the SharePoint site under RUAE. It's not true, I said. There were risks. Risks didn't materialise, but they were still risks. That's what a risk is. I've never been hit by a car, but it's not idiotic to think about it. Simon Jenkins won't be right if nobody dies. He'll be lucky, like the rest of us. Do people think this flappily in casinos? The terrible truth is yes. So the question I've set to go along with this is, how does the writer's use of word choice convey his attitude towards how people think about risk? And here I've highlighted the two words that I think are most relevant to conveying the writer's attitude towards risk. Those words being flappily and terrible in the phrase terrible truth. So having thought about the words and identified the words we think might have interesting connotations, the next step is to think, okay, so specifically for each precise word, what are the connotations of that word and what does that word therefore suggest about his attitude? Okay, and this is really, really important. This is a vital stage in your analysis of word choice. You cannot point at a sentence and talk vaguely about word choice. If you're talking about word choice, you're talking about one or more specific, precise words with their exact connotations and the effect of those connotations. So as before, it'd be a good idea for you now to pause this video and just have a think about those two words, flappily and the word terrible in terrible truth, and just try and think about what those words suggest to you as a reader about the writer's attitude towards the people he's describing. So when he says they think flappily, what is he saying about their thinking? When he says that the truth that they don't think logically about risk is a terrible truth, what is he conveying about his attitude towards them? So if we start off with the word flappily, then it has connotations of birds and wings and that kind of rapid movement of them kind of flapping their wings around. What does that suggest about how he thinks these people are thinking then? Would suggest they're not thinking clearly. It suggests maybe they're panicking as they kind of flap around, and certainly it suggests that he thinks these people are irrational, whether that's because they're thinking like birds or whether that's because they're panicking in the same way that a bird's wings might flap. Whereas if we look at the word terrible in the phrase terrible truth, well, the connotations there are a bit more straightforward. They're something that is obviously frightening or horrific. But of course, what that suggests is that truth, which is normally a good thing, is normally something we aspire to, but actually truth here is something to be feared. And that tells us that he is, of course, appalled at how these people think. Okay, it's an awful thing for him that people don't think rationally about risk. So now we're going to think about next steps. Now that you understand that to analyse word choice, you pick a specific word, look at the specific connotations, explain the specific effect of that. Now you need to think about, well, how do you practice this? Obvious ways of practicing this would be to use a textbook and look at the sort of practice questions in there, or to look at past papers perhaps and practice on those. But there are actually some more general things you can do in your own private study, particularly working on your scrapbooks that you're working on for your English teacher to help you refine your word choice skills. So here are the three sort of main types of tasks you can do. The most basic one in green there is just to revisit the articles. So look back at the articles that you've already been identifying in your scrapbook and identify examples of word choice, annotate those examples with the connotations, and then annotate those examples with the effect. So you might want to think about using two different colours. So do one colour to annotate the connotations and then another colour to annotate the effect of that connotation, what that suggests about the writer. If you're looking for something a little bit more formal to do, what you could actually then do is take that article and formally write up word choice style questions, and then write up a mark scheme with full answers for as many different examples of word choice in that paragraph that you've identified as possible. And if you do that, you can then of course share those with your peers in order to practice. So you can swap kind of a paragraph with a question and have a go at answering each other's questions to help you get a little bit better. The final thing you should do in your sort of general life, and this is part of the reasons why RUAE is such an important skill, is just be alert. Anytime you're reading something, be on the lookout for word choice that conveys something about the writer's attitude towards something else. And if you're ever listening to journalists or politicians talking, think about their word choice and think about the connotations of what it is that they are saying. Hopefully you found this useful. We've gone through word choice, we've talked about connotations, we've talked about effect, and this is an important skill for you to practice. There's going to be a series of similar short videos looking at other aspects of language, so we're going to look at imagery, looking at sentence structure, and so on, so do check those out as well.